discuss something that Moshe may have touched on in last week's reading of Parshat Pinchas. Again, just to repeat that the Torah, the whole Torah, is merely a code, and therefore, as we read what we read, it's not merely to record for us the incident or incidents that occurred and certain laws that were laid down at the time the Jews were in the wilderness, but rather for us today to provide us with some clues as to how we can deal with daily living, rather than an idea that a set of laws was set down for certain people so that they can live by those rules and laws. At the end of Parshat Balak, which deals with, again, supposedly the enemies of the nation of Israel that went out of Egypt, and these two individuals, Balak and Bilam, were destined to destroy or make an attempt to destroy the people of Israel. And as I've explained on many other occasions, the idea here of destroying the people of Israel, and whether they were successful, and as it seems to be apparent from the Torah that they were not successful, is not merely, again, a recording of two nations that waged war in an attempt to annihilate the people of Israel, but rather to teach us the root of the problems of all of humanity, in what we all have to face day in and day out, rather than one incident of what once happened. Also, it is necessary to recall, and maybe Moshe may have mentioned this, is that these two people, Bilam and Balak, whose names are certainly not familiar ones, but the names of Bilam and Balak, says the Zohar, in that Parsha of Balak, the name of the section is known as Balak, really refer to Amalek. If you take the last two letters of Balak, which is Lamed and Kuf, and you take the last two letters of Bilam, which is Ayin and Mem, you have the word Amalek. And Amalek seems to be that enemy not only of Israel, but of all of mankind. That's the enemy. And Amalek, again, using numerology as only a clue, same way as physicists use mathematics to explain away or to determine some living existence. The word Amalek also equals has a numerical value of Safek, which means uncertainty. This idea of uncertainty already is declared in the Torah, concealed as it is until the Zohar was revealed, that there is no enemy of mankind that becomes established in the way of physical human beings. There is no enemy of mankind that sometimes is concealed in natural disasters. There is no such thing, as we will shortly understand, phenomena in disease that suddenly is thrust upon mankind. Torah says one word, in a word, uncertainty. Uncertainty. That's the enemy of mankind. Uncertainty is the enemy of mankind. That is the enemy. An earthquake is an enemy of mankind. A dictatorship usually winds up to be the enemy of mankind. A plague, without knowing its source, is an enemy of mankind. But how do we relate uncertainty to the enemy of mankind? As if everything that can go wrong with mankind can be traced to that one word, uncertainty. The reason that I felt this particular subject is important, although I touch upon it both in my works and the lectures that occasionally I have an opportunity to give here, is because as often as we hear these words, for the most part they remain information and never filter down into our consciousness as knowledge. And you know the difference between information and knowledge. Knowledge is something we make use of; it becomes part of us. Where information is nice. It's something I didn't know before. It's some answers to some of the questions I may have raised before, but that literally it makes a difference in my life, or that it enhances my life. That's another matter. Therefore, as many times as we hear it, it'll depend on the level of consciousness, of our consciousness, where we are, and how we receive this information, which ultimately must turn into knowledge. If the information does not turn into knowledge, then it was a wasted experience. At the end of Balak, after these two individuals, who now we determine from the Zohar, indicates the idea of uncertainty, then, as according to all of the sages on the Bible, then these two enemies of Israel saw that they in no way could they overcome the people of Israel, which again is not referring to the people of Israel, it's referring to all the peoples of the world, not just the nation of Israel. And that because they could not succeed in their attempt to destroy, eliminate the people of Israel, they sent the most beautiful woman of their land, of the Midianites, and the intention was to seduce Moses, says the Zohar, to seduce Moses. And thereby, by overcoming and bringing down the morality of Moses, they believed that this in turn would result in the annihilation of the children of Israel. And when this woman asked how would she know who Moses was, since she had never seen him before, their answer was, as long as you see somebody who attracts many, many people, then you'll understand that this must be the famous Moses, and that people gather around him to study, to listen to his words of wisdom, etc. And this is the one that you should be dealing with. When she came into the camp of Israel, she noticed an individual who seemed to have thousands of people seated and consulting with him, and she assumed that this was Moses. But in turn, it was actually the chieftain of one of the tribes of Israel, who was Zimri. That was his name. He was the chieftain. He was the chieftain tribe of the tribe, and being the head of the tribe, he naturally also had people surrounding him, and so therefore the incident deals with the seducing of this person. And in that way, they would eliminate the children of Israel. And in fact, says the Torah, reading without any translations, this led to an outbreak of the breakdown of morality, and they all began to commit different and various sexual acts. At which time Pinchas, who was the grandson of Aaron the high priest, stood up and took a spear and killed these two people. And then it says, out of the clear blue sky, the Magdefa, the plague ended. And in this plague, there were 24,000 people. And that's the end of the story. And there is no explanation as to why the plague, first of all, began, and what kind of a plague it was. There's no description. Why did it end with the slaughtering of these two people? And that it ended in the slaughter of 24,000 people, which we know is a familiar number in the recording of history of the Jews in particular. 24,000 seems to be a number. 24,000 doesn't say 24,300, it just says 24,000. All because of Pinchas. Okay. I would like to begin in taking all of these things into consideration. I'd like to begin with the Zohar, first, for no other reason that we raise our consciousness merely by studying the words of the Zohar. I read in Pinchas, page 5, paragraph 16. Rabbi Patach, Rabbi began the discourse by introducing the verse which is mentioned in Psalms. Edut biosef shemo. B'tzeito aledes Mitzrayim. He's bringing a verse mentioned in Psalms, not in the Torah, which is referring to Joseph. Joseph, as we know, who was sold by his brothers, went into Egypt and became the second in command. And he literally ruled all of Egypt. And it says the Zohar, Shamalach lamdeu ayin lashon, k'mosh yada paro. That the greatness of Joseph was the fact that an angel came and taught him 70 languages, as Pharaoh, who then also knew so many languages. ובלשון הקודש היה גדול יותר מפרעה, שפרעה לא היה יודע לשון הקודש. And this is mentioned in the Talmud, in the tractate of Sota, one of the tractates. And it says that Joseph knew one language, in addition to all the languages that Pharaoh knew, and that was Hebrew. The Hebrew language, letters, etc. This was a language that Pharaoh was unfamiliar with. As it says, and he quotes the verse, Sfat lo yadati eshma. That Joseph says, I learned the language that I did not know before. And that language was Hebrew, meaning no one knew that language at that time, at that period. Although Adam before him did know that language. What about Abraham? What about Isaac? What language did they know? Joseph was taught the Hebrew language. And it says they taught him a language that he had not heard before. This is a Zohar, which is very difficult to understand if we merely look at the words of the wording as King David put it down. He says, Edut b'Yosef Shemo. Edut means witness. Witness to the name of Joseph. Well, it becomes more confusing. What do you mean, witness to the name of Joseph? Joseph, we know how to spell his name. But here, says the Zohar, there is a hey, an additional hey in the name of Joseph. It says Yehosef. Okay. As if that is removing some of the confusion. And the Zohar goes on, just to confuse matters a little more. He says, what does it mean, Edut? Edut in Hebrew means witness, or to give witness, bear witness. Umeshiv bo'odei. B'shah she'eshet Potifar achzato la'oto hadavar. Also speaking about sex, committing some form of violation of sex. That when Joseph was sold, if you recall the story, he was placed in the household of someone by the name of Potiphar, and he had a wife. And this wife wanted to seduce Joseph. She wanted him to go to bed with her. Something similar to what we had just read about Pinchas. And at the time that the wife of Potiphar wanted to seduce him into going to bed with her, and Joseph, as she was speaking to him, made it appear as if he doesn't understand her language, what she was saying to him. It came called Yom B'Yom, and every day, until the very last moment, when it says Vatafseo bevigdo, that she grabbed his clothing. So it says literally. Mayu, says the Zohar, what is meant by Vatafseo, that she grabbed his clothing? Ela mishum she'ad az asa asmo k'mishe'ini yodei halashon. Because until then, doesn't mean literally she grabbed his clothing. Because nothing of the Torah ever means in a literal sense that which is written. As we know, the Zohar has said that repeatedly. What does that mean? She caught him. She caught him. It's another language. When you catch someone, you grab his clothing, you've caught him. But this is not what the Torah is discussing. Ela mishum she'ad az asa asmo k'mi she'eni yodei halashon. But at that moment, she caught him. And that's the expression that we use when you catch somebody with a lie, when you catch somebody with the expression with their pants down. Have you heard that too? right? Doesn't mean literally. She then recognized that he does know the language. Now the Zohar is relating what we just described here to the story of Pinchas. And the Zohar says, just as the hay was added by King David to the name of Joseph, so too, as Moshe probably mentioned about the Yud in Pinchas, the Yud was added, a little Yud, which has another significance. But a Yud was added to the name of Pinchas, because Pinchas appears many times without the Yud. The Yud actually is not even necessary. So there was a Yud added here, and there was a Hey added there. They seem to have some relevance one to each other. They're both discussing an act of sex, which seems to be in violation of the normal principles and laws of the universe, and that is a relationship. And that is a relationship. What I thought, not what I thought, but what the verse seems to indicate here is a secret about plagues, how to deal with them, etc. Only this week, if you may have noticed, the plague of AIDS, which again no one really can ascertain to what extent the plague has engulfed all of mankind. Nobody knows anymore. They're really guessing now, throwing out horrendous figures. But what they discover, I say discover, obviously not today, but what appeared today in magazines and newspapers, and already in the conferences that are going on, is that the way they determine AIDS is when someone is tested for HIV positive. Now today, this week, they found out that someone can have a breakdown in his immunization system without having the HIV positive. In other words, there are other strains of AIDS, what they call mysterious. Mysterious. Well, why is it mysterious? Because they don't know. You know, why is Kabbalah mysterious? Because they don't know it, so it becomes mysterious. Kabbalah doesn't deal with anything else but that we deal with in our daily lives, except that, unfortunately, until 70 years ago, no one had an idea of what it was about, so naturally it becomes a mystery. And now they're faced with a new problem. Others say it's not really serious, but what seems to emerge in our day, in any event, is the idea of a plague, and a plague that we thought that while we did not have it under control, at least we had an idea of the causes of these plagues, and subsequently how to deal with the resolution of these plagues. But the Torah here is talking about plagues, and in a few words it says, when Pinchas did what he did, Vateyasar hamagefa, and the plague ended. But it doesn't say the plague ended. It doesn't say that. It says, Vatei atzar ha'magefa. Atzira means, atzira, let's say it's a curfew, right? Chotzer is a curfew in Hebrew, because you have to look into each word of the Torah. If you, I don't have an English translation, but I would assume they say Vatei atzar ha'magefa, that the plague ended. But it doesn't say that, because there is, in Hebrew, is another word for ending. Gamar, Kila, different forms, which don't mean the same kind of ending. But Vatei does not mean end. Vatei means only a suspension, like a curfew. What is a curfew? An otsa, as they have in Israel when they declare a curfew on a particular hour or village. It means what? That at that time the inhabitants are forbidden to leave their homes. What does that mean? They are not permanently forbidden. They can go out tomorrow. But there is a temporary disruption in the norm of their lives. That's what Otsa really means. It does not mean it ended, because the fact that they are prohibited from leaving their homes, does that mean the idea was that they'll never be permitted to leave their homes? No. There's a temporary disruption. When Pinchas performed the act of that which he did, I'm just curious. This is in verse 8. In verse 8, and the plague was stayed from the children of Israel. Stayed. Like you say, a stay of execution. Delayed. What does it mean it was delayed? You mean to strike again? And then why do they give the figure of 24,000? Well, maybe tomorrow there might be some more. It doesn't say it ended, so the word stayed would be correct in this case. It's close to it. Close to it. It's a disruption, in other words, from what normally was going on at that period, and it was stayed. It doesn't even tell us what the plague was about. It doesn't even tell us how these 25 people died. What was the plague? There's no mention of it. No mention of it. And this, says the Zohar, relating it to Joseph, is the answer to the questions we've raised. Certainly now it becomes even more confusing that what is the connection. Now I'd like to continue reading a little more from the Zohar, because this Zohar, as I want to repeat again, is very, very, very confusing, and if we can achieve some enlightenment, I think we might have some answers to some of our questions. We go back again to what the Zohar said. Shemevin kavanato, that she understood that when he was indicating to her, I don't know what you're talking about. She's talking to him. She wants to seduce him. And he's making out like he doesn't understand her. And when it says that she grabbed his clothing, it doesn't mean, says the Zohar, she grabbed his clothing. But she caught the falsehood, the lying. In other words, he was lying to her. He was saying that, I don't know what you're talking about. And so, when it says she grabbed onto, or tafsa, haramaot. Ramai means a liar. Bigdo, hu lashon bigida v'ramaot. In other words, bigida doesn't mean, it could mean his clothing, but in this case, the word means bigida, also in Hebrew, means unfaithful. Unfaithful. An adulteress is called a bigida. Unfaithful. These are all words that I'm just throwing out to you, but the Zohar is discussing this connection here, and by which I hope we can achieve a revelation of how we could gather a little more information and turn it into knowledge, so that we will not be caught up in the situation. Because in effect, while this is talking about one aspect of plague, the idea we associate AIDS or whatever by wording of plague, an earthquake is equally a plague. Well, what's the difference between an earthquake and, let's say, the Black Plague or the AIDS plague? What is the difference? What is the difference? You mean in the way, it can consume the same amount of people without prior warning. An earthquake doesn't tell us when it's coming. Neither does a plague tell us whom and where it will attack. What is the difference? And the answer is, there is no difference. There is no difference. The reason we call something a plague, and that's indicated in this parsha, is because it relates to uncertainty. The plague, where does AIDS come from? What is causing it? The same way as, and now that they've determined a breakdown in the immune system, does that mean now we know where it comes from? Again, what they're describing for us is only a situation of what is, which is the normal procedure in science. What is taking place? The same way as when they describe for us an earthquake, what do they tell us? They'll explain away the idea of platelets. They've come together in a certain condition, a certain set of situations, and then you have an earthquake. But what brought about this condition of the platelets in the first place? No, that still remains a mystery. They do not even make an attempt to go beyond, because that is what physics or science is about, is to describe that which all of us can observe and understand, because if we're discussing things that we have no knowledge of, things that we can't grasp with at least with our five senses, then what are we discussing? We're discussing something that nobody can see, nobody can feel. And how do you discuss matters that do not relate to something that we personally can relate to? Therefore, what the Torah is always dealing with, and that's why Kabbalah is referred to as being mysterious, is mysterious in the sense that it is beyond the five senses. It is dealing with laws and principles that you cannot connect with directly, to the result or the effect of something which is taking place. But that today is no mystery in science because quantum determined the uncertainty principle. Why do they call it uncertainty? Because if someone is eating rice in China, and therefore this man pulled the trigger, which is feasible and conceivable under the rules of quantum, therefore we now live in a world of uncertainty. Because when someone pulls that trigger, it's uncertain, it's already uncertain as to what motivated this individual. We can no longer ascribe the idea that he had a fight with his wife and therefore he pulled the trigger. The fact that some come in with a plea of criminal insanity, meaning at that moment he went insane. What does that have to do with the fighting with his wife? Well, maybe that brought it on. Maybe it didn't. Maybe there's something wrong genetically with him. And they find out that in the family, yes, there are mental situations and conditions in the family, etc. That now it could relate to another reason. In other words, in one word, uncertainty. And that's why they came to the conclusion of uncertainty. Why? Because we have been programmed, and maybe rightfully so, to the idea that if we can relate the cause to the effect is the area of our understanding. The moment that there's a demand, or the moment that we are forced into a situation where we no longer can relate the effect to the cause, we're in a dilemma. Where's the cause? Cause is somewhere you can't see it anymore. As we cannot see at the present time, that fellow eating China, in China, who's eating the rice is now affecting me to give this lecture, which is conceivable, incidentally. Conceivable. How is it conceivable? That no longer needs to be answered. You hear? It no longer needs to be answered. How that person eating rice in China can affect my delivering a lecture at this time. There is no requirement for a connection. You know why? Because they've come up with a word, a new word, called uncertainty. We live in an uncertain world. Now the Torah does not subscribe to that. That's the whole lesson over here, in a nutshell. That's why I began off by quoting the two names involved in this story. I mean, as if the names made such a difference. I mean, if they were called Harold and Joseph, I mean, would anyone object that we're discussing a story of Harold and Joseph? No. So these two people were indiscriminately referred to as Bilam and Balak. Says the Zohar, no. These two people, and examining their names, provide us with a clue as to what's wrong. And that is essentially the cause for every dilemma, for every disruption in our lives, for every disruption. The one word, uncertainty. One word, uncertainty. That is the enemy of mankind. Not only is that the enemy of mankind, but even plagues are not the enemy of mankind, but that which brought about plagues. Now what brought about these plagues? Uncertainty. Uncertainty. The root of everything. What brings about earthquakes? Uncertainty. To a large measure, we understand the connection, of course. Do we know when the earthquake will strike? No. Do we know where it will strike? No. Do we also even know whom it will strike? Will everyone become victims? No, there will always be survivors, and they'll be made victims. Everything in our lives is shrouded by that one word, uncertainty. Now, Is that what the Torah wants to draw us into this consciousness, which certainly is enlightenment, to understand that everything that goes wrong in this world, everything, can be related to the idea of uncertainty. And therefore uncertainty is the cause. Well, how is uncertainty the cause? Because uncertainty only deals with that realm of existence which we once referred to as the realm of the tree of knowledge. Tree of knowledge. Good and evil. Why is it referred to as good and evil? Because today things are good for us. Tomorrow things are not so good. The following day may be good. The following day may be not so good. This is the realm of existence that for the most part we exist. For the most part, this is the way we behave. Always with a consciousness of uncertainty. We could dismiss it and not regard that which the Zohar is stressing upon us, is the idea that we live in uncertainty. But the Zohar didn't bring the realities and truths of the Torah for us to come to a conclusion of uncertainty. No, that's not the objective. The objective, of course, is how we can remove ourselves from this uncertainty. And once you remove yourself from uncertainty, now you find yourself in the Yetzer Chaim. There is no good and evil. There's only good. Only good. Because in certainty, there is no evil. Evil only exists in uncertainty. Now, why is that so important? That we achieve that consciousness, which is not an easy consciousness to achieve. It may sound, because now it's information, but for it to become part of our daily existence, for us to react and interact with one consciousness, the avoidance of uncertainty is another matter. It is simple enough for us to understand the idea that the Zohar presents to us, this idea of uncertainty. Not too difficult, of course. Who knows what tomorrow will bring? There we are. We understand this rule of uncertainty. That's not correct. That's not correct. Uncertainty, as we will shortly understand from what the Zohar has been describing, which seems to be a mystery, but which is very simple and clear, that the moment we leave this room, and then we are faced with daily existence outside this room. Outside this room. There, we are confronted with an idea the minute you have a problem, or you meet up with somebody who is another person, who is not you, and there could be a difference of opinion, no arguments, but just that two people never can completely agree with each other. The mere fact that you meet up with one more person in this world, you are going to be confronted with an idea that is not completely in accord with your idea. And that immediately, as simple as it sounds, so simple is its effect upon us. We are already in a realm of uncertainty. I can defend my position to indicate how what I think is absolutely correct and what you think is not so correct, etc. But the mere fact that we live in this world, we are confronted, we meet up with people, situations, banks, and other conditions in our lives, we meet up with uncertainty. The fact that we could learn the fact that we can listen and hear the words of uncertainty, to apply that principle that there is another realm known as the Etz HaChaim, is one of the most difficult conditions and situations that we are confronted with every moment of the day. Every moment of the day. That what is all around us is an illusion. Well, that's nice. Everything around us is an illusion. Why do I have to perform? Why do I have to conduct? Why do I have to do anything but sit on the chair? Since everything is certain in another realm. That's why there is a Torah with laws and principles. Because the fact that we achieve a consciousness that the whole world, or the entire physical world around us as we observe it, is of an uncertainty nature, that has already been declared in the first day of creation. It says day and night. That by within itself does not lead me into the world of Etz HaChaim, the world of certainty. No. That requires effort, study, performance, meditation, to connect with the world of certainty. The world of certainty does not change, neither does the world of uncertainty change. The only thing that is always constant in this world, as I've said it in several of the publications, there's only one thing that is constant in the world, in the physical world that we exist. One thing is certain: change. It is the only constant factor in our physical level of existence, that there will always be change. Always. That is undeniable. Now, for us at least today to achieve a consciousness and also learn at the same time, how can I constantly be aware of this consciousness? That I live in the world of uncertainty. That's the first step. If you do not achieve a consciousness of the consciousness of uncertainty, then you will never, as we shall now understand the Zohar, never understand the idea that there is a realm. We may, in theory, like scientists know, there is a theory. The world is uncertainty to the extent that if you say that this chair that I'm sitting on does not exist, it does not exist. Whatever we determine in our consciousness as having existed or not having existed is determined by our consciousness, because there is nothing more than consciousness. If that is the case, if someone who has AIDS or someone who has cancer, why can't he just not declare, you do not exist? That cancer or that AIDS condition does not exist. But that was the problem that science had and continues to have, in that they cannot relate the theory with the practice. And so too do we have that same problem. And we're confronted with that problem not once a day, not twice a day, but every moment of the day. As long as we can still feel the physical consciousness of our body, that rules, has dominion over every decision we make. And therefore it is very difficult to leave the consciousness of the physical world by declaring your uncertainty. Not only you're uncertain, you physical world, but you do not even exist. The body says, I'm hungry. Well, If what scientists tell us, and if what the Zohar is telling us, and what the Torah is telling us, that this world is a world of illusion, it really isn't there. And, to a certain extent, it's not there. The moment I eat, the body says, I'm full. I'm not hungry anymore. Well, how come you were hungry? Well, now I ate. So now you're not hungry. Don't you see how that situation of being hungry a moment later can disappear? Maybe it can disappear by not eating. Maybe it could disappear by concentrating on how I'm filling my body with food. What about people who walk over coals? How do they walk over hot coals? Hot coals. How do they walk over them? Can everybody walk over hot coals? No. Some people can. Well, how can you? The body has no resistance factor to hot coals. For whom? For whom? For everybody? No, there are a few people who can walk on hot coals. So, our problem lies in the fact that we have already determined in our consciousness that if we do not eat, the body remains hungry, and it will be a gnawing effect upon me. And then, of course, a person could even die if he doesn't eat. If a person doesn't drink water, he can die. The body will just disappear. But there have been cases where Moses didn't eat for 40 days and 40 nights. Didn't drink for 40 days and 40 nights. This is the essential teaching of Kabbalah. Of all the things that I have learned in 30 years, this realization was the last thing that came to me. Oh, information. Don't venture into a new business on Mondays and Wednesdays. Good information. Helpful information. Makes life a little easier. But that stage, even in Kabbalah, which only exists since 1922, 25, where suddenly we have access into this information that simply did not exist up until 70 years ago. Just didn't exist. About the month, about Leo, about cancer. I mean, these things were not part of the mainstream, not only of Judaism. It was not part of the mainstream, and still, to a large extent, still remains outside the mainstream of most of civilization. Not everyone is into astrology. Not everyone believes in astrology. In fact, the majority of people today still do not believe in the effects of its astral influence. So it's only recently that we have become privy to this kind of information. So now that we have that information, it makes life a little easier. In the month of Cancer, we learn from Abraham, this is the month of its origin. He taught us a couple of letters that can prevent the onslaught of this scourge of mankind. Wonderful. But that somehow does not eliminate, does not stay the execution of what most of us have to suffer. I have an appointment. I have to take a plane. The plane is delayed for 6 hours. I lose my appointment. Since we are subject to the physical rules, then all of the things we learn in Kabbalah somehow, like the scientists, the theory does not always conform to the physical reality of events. And the answer is because we, as long as we remain in that consciousness that this physical world is a world that has to be dealt with, and it does have to be dealt with, and not why are we here. So we do have to deal with it. But that as we deal with it, there is a consciousness that what we are dealing with, in effect, is illusionary. This is the ultimate objective. If we do not at least understand what is required to achieve a stay of a plague, the stay of an earthquake. All of these conditions exist and will always exist in the world of tree of knowledge, the world of our existence, that today is good and tomorrow, whatever form it takes, it's always the same idea. Whether it be a plague of AIDS or call it a plague of earthquakes, it's the same idea, victim and survivor. Why is there a difference on how the idea of uncertainty, which is the root, and now I'm trying to present the idea of why uncertainty is the root, because uncertainty brings me into the consciousness of the existence of a physical world. If I never had to think twice of something that might go wrong, which realm of existence do I exist in? The realm of 1hr&30min. Certainly not in this world of existence. This world of existence is good and evil. Uncertainty. Today, yes. Tomorrow, no. As long as my consciousness is subject to this idea of uncertainty, then I exist in this world. And as long as I exist in this world, then the theory and its practicality will never come together. Never come together. So the first objective is to understand, number one, that this world is illusionary. That's already been established not only by the Torah, that was established by scientists. This is the world of illusion. Uncertainty means illusion, like the goblet and the two faces. Nothing of any physical nature it contains an aspect of reality. This already is confirmed not only by the Torah, by all of science. To achieve a connection with the 1hr&30min, we have names for that reality called 1hr&30min. We have no other choice. We have no other choice but first to relieve ourselves of this consciousnness. That is the most difficult task ahead of us. Now let's return to this Zohar. Zohar is making a connection between Joseph and Pinchas. Not only is the Zohar making this connection between Pinchas and Yosef, they do have only one thing in common. Superficially, there seems to be only one thing in common. They both deal with sex. Other than that, there seems to be no relationship. In fact, Joseph has a letter Hey inserted to indicate that Joseph left the world of uncertainty, and the Yud in Pinchas, the power of the Yud, that when we read it last week of Pinchas, was to remove him from the ever presence of the world of illusion that we find it difficult to extricate ourselves from. And he had a Yud inserted. He had a Hey inserted. Again, true, that is something they have in common, according to the Zohar, the addition of having an additional letter placed in their name. But there is another difference between the two as well. In Joseph's situation, it was dealing with Joseph and Joseph. It didn't involve anybody else other than this woman, the wife of Potiphar, who made an attempt to seduce Joseph. In the case of Pinchas, the idea was not merely to seduce Moses, but to seduce the entire peoples of Israel. So, while they both deal with the same subject, nevertheless, there is a difference. And that, incidentally, will be the reason for the difference in the letters. Because the Torah certainly is not, without reason, associating letters to particular names in the absence of adding any other letters. One of the greatest mysteries of this whole subject, but it's so apropos to our existence today that this study, just a subject here, would require maybe a lifetime. But at least we begin. We're beginning today. I'd never discussed this with me and myself before. The first time I'm discussing it. So I'm going along with you together, by the way. I don't know the answers. I have to confess I didn't even know I was going to discuss this. In fact, Moshe interrupted me just as I was trying to think maybe, what should I talk about? He said, 5 o'clock. Connected with this incident of Joseph, I know there won't be enough time today, but we're at least instilling the information into the computer. Computer, once you put the information in, the computer can kind of do things by itself. At the time of this incident with Joseph, and that's another common denominator between Joseph and Pinchas. If you recall, when Joseph refused to be seduced by the wife of Potiphar, at that moment he received the name Yosef HaTzadik. Joseph the just, the righteous. At that moment, he was not referred to as Yosef HaTzadik, the righteous, before this act of refusing to be seduced. At that moment, when Pinchas performed this act of slaying these two people, it tells us that in Pinchas, L'chein emor hineni noten lo et briti shalom. Pinchas, from that moment on, would be worthy and would be in control of the high priesthood forever. From all of his generations that emanated from Pinchas himself, he was given the right of the priesthood because of this act. Now, so there's another common denominator between the two of them. Their dimensions both changed. Joseph's dimension changed, and Pinchas's dimension changed. To the extent as we, I think is discussed in the reincarnation classes, that Pinchas was the first account in the Torah of clinical death, right? We discussed that in the classes on reincarnation. That actually, according to the stipulation of the law, that a priest that murders, justifiable as it might have been, invalidates him to the priesthood. If he committed an act of murder, as justifiable as it might have been, even at the command of God, let's say, he becomes invalid in the service of the priesthood. And therefore the Zohar says, well then how could he not only achieve or be permitted to perform the service of the priesthood, but he was then, because of this act, instilled with a consciousness of the high priesthood forever. And the Zohar concludes that what we observe here is the idea of clinical death. And that's how the Zohar extracts from just these few verses everything we've just said and more. That when Pinchas slew the chieftain of the tribe of Shimon, the entire tribe, 147,000 people, descended upon Pinchas to kill him. And when he saw these people coming towards him, out of fright he died. Literally died. Died. And at that moment, he was reincarnated with the souls of Nadav and Avihu, literally his uncles, the two sons of Aaron that had died previously, were now incarnated into the physical body, this physical body which did not undergo any changes, incidentally. Something, again, supernatural, that a body can die and yet not undergo any change. But that's what we refer to as clinical death. Someone in a hospital that literally has been declared dead by those present, trying to resuscitate, revive, and they can, and then all of a sudden, by some miraculous event or miraculous cause, the patient again survives. The patient survives. It's because he underwent clinical death. Clinical death. Meaning, the body, as we know it, is something that is alive as long as they can record something on a machine. We're considered alive. If it's brain dead, the patient is now considered dead. Now you can take his heart out, take his liver out. If he was part of a donor program, we're not going into the idea of whether there should be a donor program or not, but this person could very well be alive. Let's say the physical body could very well be alive. Well, how do you measure if someone's alive or not? So they decided if there are no brain waves, then he must be dead. But there's such an obvious, simple question that right here, we not being men of this technical as well as medical knowledge of science should raise the question. But didn't you just get through telling us that we live in a world of uncertainty? Didn't you just get through telling me that when I observe something, it could be an illusion? Who says that in a state of consciousness, when a person, for all intents and purposes, is breathing, there's movement, but the graph has just one line moving without up and down, and therefore he's declared no brain waves, and therefore he's declared as brain dead. And you now have determined that is enough for us to conclude that this person is dead. Now you can take his heart out and other parts of this person's body, but what about the uncertainty principle? Maybe he's not dead. Is there a possibility? Let's say 1/1,000,000th of 1%. Ask that doctor that if we think he's dead and there's 1/1,000,000th of 1% chance that he's alive, ask him if he wants to have his heart removed. Would he be so readily agreeable to have his heart removed? Or would he say, oh, wait a second, give it an hour or two, or give it maybe a couple of days. Let's see how long the body can continue. It's a serious matter. But we do not confront some of these phenomena because of its acceptance. But nothing can be accepted in the world of illusion. There are rules. There are rules. And someone might say, well, so what do you consider to be the Kabbalistic ruling on where there would be a graph, a machine that says there are no brain waves? What would be your decision? Well, it's not the subject to be discussed here, but I think in a small measure I've already given you the answer. Either we live by the rules, or you define the rules as you go along. Which are they? Are there rules or aren't there rules? If there are rules, the rules are that that cannot determine if the person is dead or not. It's uncertainty. Who decided on those rules? Where did these rules originate? What about the people who've been buried and then in the grave yell out, I'm alive? Or what about those people who are about to be cremated and suddenly the guy who's putting the body into the oven sees the body sweating? Body that's alive, dead doesn't sweat. I mean, how many times has that happened? Someone goes into a state of shock for an hour or 2 or 5 or 10, and everything ceases to function, yet he's alive, and then comes out of that catatonic state. What's sure? And we have to ask ourselves our own questions. What is sure in my life? What is sure now that I'm hassling now with the bank that is demanding I repay the loan now? For me to say, where'd you come from? He says, no, I'm the guy who lent you money 2 years ago. And you don't exist. But I gave you a loan. The loan doesn't exist. Proof of the loan doesn't exist. See, the property has no value. So where's your loan?
In today's market, it's possible.
It's all possible. It's all possible. Why is it all possible? Because the Torah already gave us the origin of what's wrong. Of what's wrong in our existence. In our physical existence, the physical reality that we live with day in and day out, that at its very least, we have to come to some understanding, reconciliation with ourselves, that to a certain degree, to a larger degree, or maybe to the entire degree, that everything around us is a world of illusion. Now, of course, that brings with it some danger. What is the danger? Some people might decide to stop working. He'll go into the marketplace after hours, when they throw away the food, all the fruits and vegetables on the floors to be swept up, like some people do today. And that's the way he's going to live. But wait a second. How do you live that way? Well, because he believes that this whole environment, this whole reality that we observe is really an illusion. That's what they say. This whole idea is an illusion. Everything can be answered, except you go home and say, "Well, I just heard this lecture, but wait a second. The bank manager is calling me. He says he wants the money." Am I to sit and say, well, you don't exist? Is that the way we have to deal with it? Well, that's the way Mexico dealt with it. When the American government came and said, you owe me $6 billion. He says, I can't pay it. Doesn't exist. He said, but if you lend me another $3 billion, we'll work out some arrangements how I can pay you back. Did that happen? Yeah. What is that? I mean, he has no money, can't pay, and they give him more money. You understand that? No, this is every aspect of our lives. And laughing about it, and because we're in the age of Aquarius, are all these ridiculous things happening. It is only happening because little by little, the age of Aquarius is chipping away at the consciousness of the physical reality. Little by little it's chipping away. Little by little. We're even discussing it now, trying to apply what physicists and mathematicians have been speaking about now for the past 70 years. For the past 70 years. They're discussing the world of illusion. They're discussing that we live in a world of illusion. They're discussing we live in a world of uncertainty. But yet, this doesn't mean that we can apply it, or we should apply it, to our daily existence. One has nothing to do with the other. And that's where the road is opening up. That's where we're beginning to come to some understanding that the path we've taken obviously is a path to a dead end. Because everyone falls into a plague, everyone falls into an uncertainty, everyone falls into this mishap, that mishap, and this mishap. That goes without saying. Because that's the way life goes. When you're over past the age of 20, your body begins to deteriorate. That's the way it goes. That's the way it's been established. By whom? By the same people who set up the idea that brain waves, non-existent brain waves, is indicative of brain dead. Who set up these rules? Where are the rules? Are there any other rules? Yes, there are other rules. Where are the rules? Here's the rules. Here are the rules. Where are the rules? This rule is in Joseph. The whole rule is in Joseph and Pinchas. So at least when we came to reading of the Torah on Shabbat, at least we concentrated on the Yud. Well, why do we concentrate on the Yud? The Yud, because it's small, doesn't belong there. What we've done is gone out of the realm of the norm, because the words of the letters of the Torah are all written the same size. Now, suddenly, in this name, there's an injection of a Yud. Not just a Yud, but a little one. Out of the norm. What for? Why? To teach us that the norm is what we are confronted with in our reality of every day. That's the norm. Brain dead. And every other aspect and of every moment of our physical existence. As long as we live within the norm, we have no chance to move out of the physical reality and its consequences. But the minute we go out of the norm, at least make an attempt to go out of the norm, then there is another world waiting for us. Which world? The world of Pinchas. The world of Joseph. What was the world of Joseph? We said that at that moment he became Joseph the just, Joseph the righteous. But I only gave you part of the implication. At that moment, he became a chariot of the world of Eitz Chaim. He became the chariot for the Sfirah of Yesod. And as we know, Yesod is in the realm of 1hr&30min, which is that outer space reality, the reality of Eitz Chaim. At that moment, he flipped into another situation. So when he controlled all the food of the world and he became this and he became that, a nice ending to what was considered to be such an awful story. You know how it is to be so cherished by his father, so loved by his father, be separated by a father that he loved and the love for the father, for him, etc., and then sold by your own brothers into slavery, thinking maybe they even wanted to kill you, and then having achieved this consciousness of moving into the realm of the tree of life, what happens? He's locked up for 2 more years in jail. Locked up in jail, in a dungeon. A story, all part of an explanation to the realm of life that we exist. But that's what happened to both of them. Joseph flipped and went into another reality. Pinchas, who was not destined to be the high priest forever, at that moment, he went into another consciousness. How did he go into another consciousness? At that moment, he was incarnated with 2 of the highest souls that had ever inhabited this physical universe, Nadav Avihu, as the Zohar describes, of such high dimension, both of them. The dimension of beyond the physical reality. So when we have that Yud there, the Yud, which is the smallest letter to begin with, is now what? So condensed into becoming even a smaller letter than its appearance. And the Yud is the smallest letter of the Aleph Bet. The Hey. What is the Hey for us? Why did David insert the Hey? Because he's a witness. Joseph is a witness. A witness to what? Joseph is a witness how, from the physical reality of being born Joseph, he flipped into another dimension. Warp time. You see all these different crazy movies moving into another time. Into somewhere else. How? The Hey. What does the Hey mean? The Hey we learned was the Hey that was inserted in Avram's name. His name was first Avram, and then it became Avraham. That means he could physically alter from being one who could never bear children, create children. He could never create children. A flip of a letter, a flip of a dimension. When the Zohar was discussing about the languages, and that he knew this, and therefore he was in control, because Joseph is the witness. What can happen? What can happen in this physical realm? You can go from one dimension overnight, in a matter of moments, into another dimension. We all experience those things of moving from one dimension into another. Therefore, there's millions of other questions that we have raised. We've raised some initial questions. Maybe we haven't gotten to all of the answers. But when it says the Magefa was stayed, but Teyasaha Magefa, the plague ended, it doesn't say. It says it was stayed. Why does it say it was stayed? Because while we can flip into another reality, as long as the actual time of where the physical realm of controlling us with a consciousness of uncertainty, does not disappear, and that disappears. That's what Mashiach means. The word Mashiach means that one idea. The end of uncertainty. That's all it means. It doesn't mean a guy coming on a donkey and now everything is going to be full of bliss and so on. We don't have to add what's bliss. One man's blessing is another man's death knell. What's the definition? Uncertainty. It's such that one word can open up such vistas. That one word, without going into a long discourse of what makes happiness and what brings deprivation. One word. Therefore it says, "V'teyatzar ha'magefa." We're not discussing an incident here that took place once and maybe it never happened again or will never happen again. No. Pinchas, with his newfound consciousness, because he underwent clinical death, he could remove everyone with him. But the realm of physical reality, where there are plagues of uncertainty, that remains. It didn't end, like the war to end all wars didn't end all wars. It's only stayed until the next one. It stayed. I like the word stayed. I just caught it. It stays. We think stayed means, well, now we pushed it away. No, on the contrary. Now we've made it stay. Because that remains. Facing this physical reality remains.
Is reincarnation to the same body?
Yeah. We can undergo clinical death and incarnation without that. I'll just mention what the Ari says. Every time you move from one location to another, you undergo an incarnation. You're undergoing a clinical death. It's an opportunity. Who wants to move? Nobody likes to move. Everyone likes to stay in the same place. But if he's forced to move from one place to another, he's actually undergoing an incarnation or a clinical death.
So it's relative.
Okay.
Uncertainty, do you mean like pure chance, or by something that's unsure?
It means both. What's chance? What is chance? Now I have to know what your definition of chance means.
Fate, just
It's uncertain. Because you know why? Is it really uncertainty? Is it known whether the coin will be heads or tails? Is it already known? Sure it is. You have a coin? If you read The Power of One, I mentioned it.
I haven't read that yet.
Okay. I flipped it. What is it?
Either heads or tails.
But is it known already if it's heads or tails? You think it's going to change now?
No, it's not going to change.
But for you, it's still chance. Because you have to take a guess, is it head or tail? But is it really head or tails? Or is it an illusion to you right now that if it's head or tail?
It's an illusion, because I can't see it.
It's so obvious it's an illusion, because over there it's heads. That's not going to change by whatever you're going to do. It's already been established. Everything has already been established. Everything is certain. But we inject the consciousness, so you just injected uncertainty into whether this was a head or tail. Is that correct? It's so simple.
Excuse me?
It's so simple. Then what's so difficult?